Broncos country. What happened to our star cornerback against the Colts left everyone shocked. Pat Surtain, too, the best defensive back in the league, had one of the worst performances of his career. But is it really his fault? Sean Payton finally spoke about the situation, and his statements will surprise you. If you bleed orange and blue, stay until the end of this video because we're going to uncover what really happened in Indianapolis and why our defense, which should be impenetrable, was completely shredded by the Colts. Before we start the complete analysis, Denver Broncos family, tell me in the comments, were you disappointed with Pat Surtain last Sunday, or do you believe it was just a bad day? I want to know your opinions. Folks, what we saw last Sunday was something we simply weren't prepared to see. Pat Surtain, too, our Defensive Player of the Year champion, had one of the most questionable performances since he arrived at Mile High. And when I say questionable, I'm being very polite here. Let's look at the harsh numbers that hurt any Broncos fan's soul. 9 targets against Pat Surtain, and 7 of them were completed. 7. That represents 63 yards allowed by our best cornerback. To give you a sense of what this means, this is the most receptions Surtain has allowed in a single game during his entire professional career. But hold on. Broncos country, before we start criticizing our golden boy, let's understand what Sean Payton said about this whole situation. And our head coach's words might completely change your perspective on what happened that cursed afternoon in Indianapolis. When reporters confronted Payton about Surtain's performance, we expected a diplomatic response, right? Something like, he'll improve, or that's just part of the game. But no, Payton went straight to the point and explained something that many people didn't understand while watching the game. According to our coach, it wasn't a matter of the Colts deciding to test Surtain on purpose. The reality is much more complex than that, family. Payton explained that the Colts' offense worked through natural progressions of the plays, not through a specific strategy to attack our cornerback. What does this mean in practice? That the Colts quarterbacks were following their normal field reads, checking receivers in a predetermined sequence, and by coincidence, or our bad luck, they ended up finding openings against Surtain. But let's be honest here, folks. Regardless of the tactical explanation, the result on the field was devastating for our defense. The Colts managed 306 yards through the air. 306 yards. That's outrageous for any defense, let alone one that has the best cornerback in the NFL. And look at this complicated situation. Tyler Warren, a rookie tight end for the Colts, was the guy who hurt our secondary defense the most. 79 receiving yards. A rookie embarrassing our defense like this breaks any Broncos fan's heart. But it doesn't stop there, family. Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, the Colts wide receivers, combined for 10 receptions for 119 yards. And here comes the most painful stat. Pierce, who was being covered directly by Surtain on several plays, averaged 17 yards per reception. 17 yards per reception against our best defensive player. That's the kind of statistic that makes any defensive coordinator lose sleep, folks. And to complete the nightmare scenario, Surtain also left the game injured. An ankle injury that, fortunately, doesn't seem serious, but certainly hindered his performance even more during the game. Now, Broncos country, let's analyze the words of Shane Steichen, the Colts coach. Even after achieving all this success against our star cornerback, the guy maintained total respect for Surtain. Steichen said he considers Pat one of the best, if not the best, cornerback in the league currently. This shows how much our player is respected around the NFL, even after a bad performance. And here's something interesting. The opposing coach himself acknowledged that his players accepted the challenge against Surtain. In other words, they knew very well who they were playing against and prepared specifically for it. But here comes the part that caught my attention most in Sean Payton's press conference. When asked if he expected this performance to repeat, our coach was categorical. He doesn't believe this was a planned strategy by the Colts to specifically attack Surtain. Payton explained that during the Monday and Thursday game plan meetings, the Colts probably didn't sit down and say, "Let's attack Pat Surtain all game long." According to him, everything happened more naturally through play progressions. So, Denver Broncos family, can we believe this? Or is it just a way to publicly protect the player? Honestly, I think there's a bit of both there. On one hand, it makes sense that an offense wouldn't plan to specifically attack the opposing team's best cornerback. It's somewhat counterproductive, right? On the other hand, it's impossible to ignore that 9 targets against one player in a game don't happen by accident. What I think really happened was a combination of factors. First, the Colts offense was working very well overall. When your attack is flowing, you naturally find more opportunities against any player, even the best ones. Second, and here's where it hurts to admit, maybe Surtain really did have a bad day. There's no way around this reality. Even the best players in the league have a below-expected performances from time to time. Third, and this is crucial, our pass rush wasn't working. When you can't pressure the quarterback, he has enough time to find openings in any coverage. No matter how good it is, and here's a point that few are talking about, aren't we putting too much pressure on Surtain? The guy is fantastic, without a doubt, but he's just one player. Football is a team sport, and you can't expect one cornerback, no matter how good, to solve all the defense's problems alone. Look, Broncos country, let's be fair in our analysis here. Pat Surtain continues to be one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. One bad performance doesn't erase everything he's done for this franchise. Remember what he did last season? The decisive plays that saved our season multiple times? And let's also remember that the guy was playing injured. An ankle injury is no joke for a cornerback who needs agility and the ability to change direction to cover elite receivers. But we also can't make excuses for what happened. The defense as a whole was outplayed by the Colts, and that includes our defensive star. It's part of the team's maturation process to recognize when things didn't work and work to improve. And speaking of improving, family, now comes the trial by fire. Week 3, and we're going to face the Chargers in Los Angeles. Our first divisional matchup of the season, and after the disappointment against the Colts. We have no margin for error. The Chargers have dangerous receivers, and you can be sure they watched the tapes from the Indianapolis game. If they saw weaknesses in our secondary defense, you can bet they'll try to exploit that too. But this is where I trust Sean Payton and our team's ability to adjust. Payton isn't a rookie coach, folks. The guy knows how to analyze what went wrong and make the necessary corrections. And more importantly, he clearly still trusts Surtain. In his statements, you don't see even a hint of long-term concern about our cornerback. Payton treats this as an anomaly, something that happened due to specific game circumstances and shouldn't repeat. This coach's confidence is fundamental, family. A player like Surtain needs to know he has the total support of the organization, especially after a performance like this. The last thing we want is our best defensive player taking the field with doubts or lack of confidence. And let's talk about the broader context here. We're only in the second week of the season. We still have 15 games ahead, including playoffs if we do our part. One bad performance in September doesn't define an entire season. Remember, great players respond to adversity with great performances. And I'm absolutely certain that's what we'll see from Pat Surtain too in the coming weeks. The guy didn't get where he is by accident, family, but we also need to be realistic about our expectations. We can't expect Surtain to be perfect in every game. Even the greatest cornerbacks in the league give up yards and receptions. The difference is inconsistency throughout the season, and in that regard, Surtain has always been exemplary. And here's something Sean Payton mentioned that I think is fundamental: the importance of play progressions. Modern football is a chess game where every move has a reaction. If our pass rush isn't working, it directly affects the coverage work. If our linebackers aren't adequately covering the middle of the field, it forces the safeties to help, which leaves the cornerbacks more exposed on the edges. It's all connected, folks. That's why I don't put the blame for this performance solely on Surtain. Of course, he had his share of responsibility, but we can't ignore that the defense as a whole didn't work against the Colts. And let's be honest, the Colts played very well too. Sometimes the opponent simply executes better than you, and there's not much you can do except accept it, learn, and move forward. Shane Steichen prepared an offense that managed to find gaps in our defense, and his players executed on the field. It's annoying to admit, but it's part of the game. The important thing is not to let it happen again. Now, Broncos country, let's talk about the coming weeks. As I said, we face the Chargers in Week 3, and that's going to be an important thermometer to see how our defense responds to this adversity. The Chargers have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and other receivers who can cause problems for any secondary defense. It'll be interesting to see how Payton adjusts the game plan to better protect Surtain and our entire coverage. One thing I expect to see is more help from the safeties for our cornerbacks. I'm not saying Surtain needs a babysitter, but in specific situations, having a safety over the top can make all the difference in the world. I also expect to see improvements in our pass rush. As I said before, pressuring the quarterback is fundamental to helping the coverage. If we can get to the opposing quarterback faster, that will make the job much easier for Surtain and our entire secondary defense. And here's my prediction. Family Pat Surtain, too, will have a phenomenal performance against the Chargers. Great players respond to criticism and adversity with great plays, and our cornerback is no different. The guy has too much professional pride to let one bad performance define his season. You can bet he's training even harder this week, studying even more film, and preparing to show why he's considered the best cornerback in the NFL, and Sean Payton knows this too. That's why he didn't panic in the press conference. The coach knows his player, knows Surtain's character and determination, and trusts that he'll respond the right way. But let's take the opportunity to talk about something that often goes unnoticed, the pressure that exists in being considered the best at your position. Every game, every snap, every target, people are expecting a perfect performance from Surtain. This pressure can be both motivating and harmful. On one hand, it keeps the player always focused and determined to give his best. On the other hand, it can create tension that interferes with natural performance. The important thing is that our cornerback knows how to balance this pressure and use it to his advantage. And from his career so far, it's clear he knows how to do this very well. Now, Denver Broncos family, let's stop for a moment to contextualize this situation within the general panorama of our season. We're 1-1 after 2 weeks, which is neither cause for celebration nor despair. The loss to the Colts hurt, especially the way it happened. But we still have plenty of time to correct the problems and show what we're capable of. And an important part of this correction involves our defense's performance. With Pat Surtain, too, functioning at his best level, our defense automatically becomes one of the best in the league. But when he's not at his game, as we saw against the Colts, the entire defensive unit suffers. That's why it's so important for him to recover quickly from this bad performance. Not just for his confidence, but for the whole team's confidence. When your best players are playing at a high level, it elevates everyone around them. So, Denver Broncos family, let's use this moment as an opportunity to show our maturity as fans. Let's support our players when they need it, and celebrate when they return to playing at the level we expect. And speaking of returning to the expected level, I'm sure that this coming Sunday we'll see a much better version of our defense. Sean Payton will have an entire week to work on the necessary adjustments, and our players will have time to process what happened and prepare adequately. The Chargers are a strong divisional opponent, but they're also a perfect opportunity for our defense to show that the performance against the Colts was just a temporary setback. And when Pat Surtain, too, returns to making those spectacular interceptions and those perfect coverages that we all love, this bad performance will remain just as a distant memory of a day that didn't go right. That's it for now. Broncos country. Keep following all the news about our favorite team, and remember, in good times and bad, we're a family. Pat Surtain, too, continues to be our star cornerback, and one bad performance doesn't change that. If you're true Broncos country, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any play of our season. Hit the notification bell because whenever there's news about the Broncos, you'll know first here. What do you think, Denver Broncos family? Will Pat Surtain redeem himself against the Chargers, or do you think it might take longer for him to return to his best level? Comment below with your honest opinion. Like if you still trust our star cornerback. Share with that friend who's also Broncos country, And until the next video where we'll continue following all the plays of our season toward the playoffs.